Welcome to AP U.S. History. This is Chapter 16. We're going to be looking at the Civil War. Now, Chapter 15, we looked at all the things leading up to the Civil War. The Clinton Amendment was, they attempted to try to pass that in 1860. It went of no avail. They were trying to guarantee the Southerners that they could keep their slaves, but it just didn't pass the muster. Lincoln is going to call up 75,000 troops. More states are going to secede from the Union. There will be 11 Confederate states that withdraw from the Union. This war is going to last for 4 years. It's going to be one of the most costly wars in American history. 600,000, over 600,000 men died in this war. In terms of looking at some of the graphs and charts, um, uh, we'll look at the Union strategy. Um, Initial attempts to win the war in Virginia failed miserably. The first battle, from the Northerners' perspective, was Bull Run. They tried the Peninsula Campaign, Vicksburg, and Chancellorsville. All of these defeats for the Union Army. Uh, the war developed into a four-phase strategy, and it was geared more towards attrition, that is, wearing each other out. The North hoped to strangle trade for the South by employing the Anaconda Plan, uh, putting boycotting everything that was coming in from Europe. Um, they had the Union fleet around southern ports to prevent foreign ships from coming in. They also wanted to control the Mississippi and cut the Confederacy in two. So this blockade was around it in the Gulf of Mexico and on the Atlantic. Um, Later, they will cut a swath through Georgia. This is Sherman's march to the sea, and then he will move northward. They always wanted to capture Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy. And eventually these things will be accomplished. They're not going to ask you a lot of questions about the war. They ask mostly about the the strategies, the results, those kinds of things, what caused, or what were the outcomes. But in terms of individual battles, not so much. Bull Run, or the Confederates called Manassas, was the first battle. It was fought in Virginia. Um, the Northern public will pressure the government for a quick and decisive victory. Union forces nearly won the battle, but the Confederates' reinforcements under Stonewall Jackson will carry the day. There were actual people who came from Washington, D.C., picnic lunches, buggies, and their families to watch the battle. When the battle turns against the North, these spectators will try to flee the battlefield. They'll clog the roads, further adding to the chaos. Here you can see where the Union was trying to pressure the Confederacy, and the red where the Confederacy was trying to pressure the Union. The border states, Missouri, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, will this is where it will be fought. The Union forces were routed at Bull Run. In terms of a psychological impact, it was devastating on the North. The North realizes that it will be a long and bloody battle. The South they grew overconfident because they had whipped the Yankees. The Union forces regrouped under General George McClellan. He will be the commander of the Union forces. He will be removed and then placed back in command and then removed again. He was great for preparing logistics. never really had a mind for winning the war. His fatal flaw was that he was overcautious, and because of poor leadership in the Union Army, uh, he will be removed from command. The Union blockade, the Anaconda Plan, was to strangle the South from exporting its cotton and getting goods from Europe. Uh, and for the most part, no foreign country was able to consistently supply war materials to the South because of the blockade. The Union ships would turn them back. The Battle of the Ironclads will take place. This was wooden ships overclad with iron. Cannonballs bounced off the ironclads. The Merrimack was from Virginia. It was a Confederate ship. It when it first was commissioned, it went out and sank three um, Union ships. But then the next day, it will meet the ironclad from the north. So, and it threatened to disrupt the blockade, but the Monitor will face it, and they will face off and pound on each other. And after a 4-hour battle, the Merrimack uh, uh, goes back to port. Neither side really won the battle. Of course, both sides will claim the battle. Uh, the Merrimack never again a serious threat. Eventually, it was blown up at North Fork by the Confederates when the ship was in danger of falling into Union hands. The war in the East goes badly for the Union troops in 1862. The Peninsula Command or Campaign. This shows a picture of the Monitor there. McClellan abandoned a direct frontal attack, and he was trying to outflank the Confederacy. But Robert E. Lee, who's in supreme command of the Confederates, was able to halt the Peninsula Campaign, and eventually they abandoned it. At that point, McClellan was removed from command, and there'll be a series of generals that are brought in by the Union, and they're all going to be very ineffective. The Second Battle of Bull Run, again, General Pope attacked Lee but was defeated. So defeat after defeat after defeat for the Union troops. Antietam is a turning point in the war. This is the most costly battle of the entire war. About 22,000 men were killed. It is the first time on the battlefield that there's really a draw, and this is a boost for Union morale. Lee invaded Maryland, hoping to take the Union and encourage foreign intervention on their behalf, but the battle ends in a stalemate. But it is the most costly battle of the Civil War. Union should have won with numerical edge. McClellan, again, is removed a second time because he's not decisive enough. This shows the Battle of Antietam, and 23,000 casualties. It was a bloody affair. South never again so near complete victory, but they will lose. France and England are going to decide to stay out of the Civil War because it looks like the South may not be able to win the war, and Lincoln is threatening to declare war in anyone who tries to intervene. Lee lost about 25% of his soldiers. The Union had a far larger army than Lee, but Lee is fighting a defensive war, so it doesn't take as many troops to hold a position. Because of the victory, Lincoln will issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves in the Confederacy. Did it free anybody? No, but it was a symbolic gesture. So in 1862, Congress had passed a Confiscation Act that said that if slaves fell into the Union hands, they would be treated as contraband and not returned to their slave masters. The cabinet tried to dissuade Lincoln from issuing this proclamation, but because they didn't think that it was the right time. They were hoping that they could end the war through negotiation. This seemed to his cabinet members that this would prevent that. But it didn't free a single slave. All the border states were able to keep their slaves. It was only those areas that had seceded from the Union. But under this Confiscation Act, slaves were treated as contraband of war and not to be returned to their slave masters. Slaves that escaped to freedom would be not returned to owners or in the seceded territories. The act was a precursor to the Emancipation Proclamation. In the first day of January 1863, Lincoln will issue the Emancipation Proclamation. He believes that it gives the North a moral high ground. Now, Lincoln would never have fought the war to free the slaves. He fights the war to restore the Union. But this is going to be an issue that they're going to incorporate to rally more support. Did not go as far as a Compensation Act for freeing enemy-owned slaves, because slaves were still prevalent in the border states: Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. Didn't free those slaves. The proclamation was more symbolic, and again, it didn't really free a single slave. Constitutionally, the proclamation was somewhat questionable, but the 13th Amendment will settle that, because it will end involuntary servitude or slavery in the United States in 1865. All slaves in the area in rebellion were declared now and forever free. Of course, this made the South, infuriated the South, and forced them to fight on. But the slave and border states not included. Many people on the border felt that Lincoln had gone too far. The abolitionists that he hadn't gone far enough. And of course, the South accused Lincoln of trying to stir up a slave insurrection. Of course, I don't think that he really cared at that point. I think we'll finish this right now, and we'll come back and take part 2 next time.